Love me a buffet. Buffets and cruises go hand in hand, I understand. Still got that dream. Buffets a go-go. That's all I want. I'm a simple man. Just some buffets.
Welcome to Crash, the podcast about tech being at the centre of everything, whether that be economics, politics, philosophy, ethics, community, law, religion, education, or literally anything else. Today that means tech's so-called buy or bury strategy and whether or not there's a feature or a bug, how half the internet can fall over because of a single feature file, and the very, very slow war on fast fashion. I'm Alex Hudson.
And I'm Chris Stokel-Walker. How are you hating tech this week, Alex?
I love all tech. I am a tech journalist and very happily so, and I think all innovation is good. The main way I keep trying to vibe code, and I keep hitting the paywall quite quickly because I'm asking it to do too many ridiculous things. Like, you are using 60% of your allowance, 70, 80, 95. You have overused it. I've now spent money on one. It doesn't make it better. It just means you get slightly longer to mess it up.
Okay, what are you trying to vibe code?
I can't talk about it, but it is
always
for someone
isn't it?
Someone I'm working with. If it works, it will be revolutionary, and it should be about a 6-month project that I'm trying to cram into a week. So if it works, it'll be a real proof of concept that actually does show that vibe coding does have a future.
Almost certainly. I have vote coded a game, actually, into existence that I use with my students, which is they are unable to write top lines of news reports very well. News stories. I call them news reports because otherwise they get confused. If they think of it as a story, then they start to think of it like a novel. And they get given a load of text that is in a garbled way, as often press releases are, and they have to try and pick out what is the top line for that story and how they would present it in the form of the top line of a news story. And then it gets sent to an AI. The AI is trained on my tastes and also a little bit of theory as to how these things work. And then it gets scored.
I like the idea that the important evidence-based system uses your knowledge as the one truth that we are all craving.
Well, you know it, exactly. I'm actually also frustrated at a different part of tech, Alex, which is that I spent literally 3 minutes trying to untangle my wired headphones before I joined this call to record this podcast.
I'm not sure if you've heard of this. There are wireless headphones. It sounds better. It's easier. You're not a Gen Z.
There are like 3,000 things wrong with what you just said in terms of starting with the better sound quality, because I've heard people with AirPods going they're not being able to say anything at all. So that is wrong.
The sound quality is now comparable. I appreciate. I got in trouble twice when reviewing tech for Metro. One was I reviewed a pair of the original AirPods and said it was the one clear way to spot a wanker was anyone who wore them. That was the headline or something like that, because the sound quality just it ignored the mids, and it was offensive to all music listeners. The AirPods Pro, which I do and am wearing, fix all of that problem and are a wonderful, wonderful piece of kit. The other one was for a smartwatch that made a weird quacking noise when you walked with it. It's a long story.
No.
Anyway, buy wireless headphones. On to real stories. Meta does not have to split out Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, or any of its other properties following its victory in a Federal Trade Commission or FTC antitrust suit, which alleged Meta overpaid to purchase Instagram and WhatsApp in a buy or bury strategy, where big tech looks at any potential competitors and either buys or the clues in the title. It comes the same week as Amazon Web Services AWS and Microsoft's Azure, the two biggest cloud firms, are investigated by the European Commission on similar anti-competitive grounds, though no charges have been brought. This is a business story deep-rooted in all of the late-stage capitalism cliches, but it throws up a few important questions around tech innovation. Question 1. Do British startups now plan for the acquisition exit model and just build enough of a fuss to sell into the US? Number 2, given that the top 10 US tech firms account for 1/6 of the global value of all stock exchanges, is this model now too big to fail or too big to succeed? And question 3, is this a precedent that means other precedents don't matter? Or is it just another unprecedented precedent that doesn't set a precedent in these unprecedented times? I was expecting that to take more than one take. Chris, which one of those really simple, straightforward questions do you want to try and tackle first?
I guess we'll have to go for question 1 because I lost track halfway through question 3, but you're going to have to repeat question 1, to be honest.
Question 1. Do British startups now plan for the acquisition exit model and just build enough of a fuss to sell into one of the big tech giants?
Yes, and that is, I think, an issue actually for the EU and for the UK in terms of championing their homegrown talent, because one of the things that we have heard, and you will have heard this as much as I have when we talk to people within these sectors closer to home, they are always simultaneously very excited to try and sell up and find an exit, often in the US, but they are also looking for excuses to try and stay at home and unable to do that because they can't realise a good return from either the EU or from the UK. Now, I think that work is even going to be more difficult to try and convince people to stay at home, because actually, if you are not going to have your multi-billion-dollar deal cancelled by antitrust regulators, then why on earth would you try and do all of this stuff at home? Interesting that this comes also the same day, the announcement that we saw a summit within Europe focused on basically sovereignty, a lot of stuff trying to say, well, we're going to slash through some of the red tape that has typified the challenges of Europe in particular to make sure that you want to build your businesses within Europe. I mean, now that's even less likely to happen.
I know we talked last week about the sort of EU trying something and then failing, and the US just coming in with its bigger economy and bigger shoes and bigger rhetoric and just saying, don't do that, and the EU back down. Even though the EU is talking the talk when it comes to this regulation, unless it's a global thing, does it matter?
I think that it does still, because I think that, or rather, I think that it matters that there is more than just talk, because at the minute, there is a very easy criticism of Europe, which is it is this place where innovation goes to die and gets stifled by everything that we throw up against it. The boring talking points of right-wing US tech think tanks of, oh, well, the only thing that the EU ever gave is a lot of headache, hassle, and the cookie banner, which is, both of those things combined. There's some really interesting data that's literally just been released today. They've just announced what the actual simplification package is going to be, their digital rulebook or omnibus, comparing modifying the GDPR and the AI, none of which sounds good for personal data, but at least in terms of tackling one of those talking points, in terms of the cookie banners, they literally have a table in there, and there's a guy called Lucas Oljelnik, who's a really interesting researcher, always looks through this sort of stuff. He's been pouring through that this afternoon. Turns out that removing the cookie banners will save billions of euros for European businesses, because they're making an estimate that around about half of websites that currently have cookie banners will no longer need to display them, and that will save them huge amounts of money in terms of this.
Explain why it saves billions.
Okay, because you are saving productivity, basically. So I'm looking at this table right now, okay? So there is a table buried deep in this report which says that the productivity savings per year will figure out to be something like 4.48 billion euros, because, and stick with me here, I have to stick with you through your a very complicated third question, so you listeners will have to stick with me for this
just
one.
It's just the same word over and over again. It's not complicated, it's just pretentious. It's different.
You know what, though? It was good. It was slick. I liked it. So the average user visits 100 websites a month, around about 85% of which use cookie banners. You spend an average of 3.5 seconds clicking the banner to get rid of it. That equals 334 million hours spent on cookie banners each year. The average wage across the European Union is something like 33.5 euros, and an after-tax wage of that is around about 30 to 70%. So when you do those sums, you end up with something between 3.36 billion and 5.6 billion savings. The average of that being around about 4.5 billion euros saving in terms of the productivity gains that we get from not having to accept all cookies.
Given that data, why wasn't this done earlier? Because all of this GDPR stuff, I've been in those discussions before it was enacted about what we do and what we can get away with, and all of the sort of nuances about what we will get fined for and what we won't. Given the amount of time and effort we spent into that, and given the relatively little difference, excluding the pushing that cookie banner as you talk about, that it is made on day-to-day web browsing, why hasn't this been done before?
Because I think that the EU liked the idea of being the global police force for the internet. And I think that they were able to sustain that until a transformational technology came about that they stood a chance of competing with. So if we look back, sort of the broad sweep of the last 25 years of our digital lives, we have always been in thrall to Silicon Valley. And we had just assumed that we had basically lost that fight and we were never going to be able to create a EU competitor to a US big tech firm. With the arrival of ChatGPT and the generative AI revolution that kicked off, that changed somewhat. We actually had a chance of competing here because the clock reset. We were almost all starting from scratch at the start line. Nobody got a head start. Nobody had a few hundred meters advantage. There was this opportunity to try and capitalize on this. What happened was the EU effectively scuppered themselves by putting through that AI Act, by rapidly redrawing it to account for the generative AI moment, setting back the EU 10 or so meters. But maybe they still now think, well, there is an opportunity here to really have some skin in the game, to mix my metaphors really terribly. And so they're thinking, well, actually, if we do slash all of this for red tape and we do kind of say, well, we are now open for business, we're trying to do more, there is, I think, an incentive to try and do that. And so that's maybe why they're fessing up. Now, whether or not these numbers are actually, based in reality, I have a feeling probably that the EU is actually embracing the savings that they're presenting here to say, well, look, weren't we awful in terms of how much red tape we tied you up in? And look how we're now liberating you from that. We're saving you 4.5 billion every single year. Probably not that much, but I do imagine those cookies are really annoying, those bandits. I don't like them myself.
So then getting back to the question, do British startups now plan for the acquisition exit model? I think anecdotally, I've heard so many CEOs, so many venture funders, startup kids, and they all have the post-it note sprints to decide whatever their next funding or whatever their next startup is, but it's based on how likely it is that one of the big 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, depending on which blog you read as to how big that number is, tech companies will take it over, and whether or not they can sell in 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years. And that is the whole point of their business. And that's good capitalism, bad capitalism, good startup. I don't know is that sensible? You earn your 10 million, your 20 million, your 50 million, and then that's you set for life. Is that a bad thing or is that a good thing? I've no idea what I think about this sort of holistic, beautiful, make the world better type tech startup.
Depends on whether you get that 5 or 10 million, right?
What is it, 70% fail in 1 year? I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but it's like 50% fail in 1 year, 70% by year 3, or what they are some big, heavy numbers of failure.
Yeah, I think it is interesting also, though, that not to get too philosophical about this, but if you think about the different temperaments, there is an American dream coded aspect to why the US continues to punch above its weight. Well, not even above its weight, but it just continues to dominate in setting up these startups. And it's a reason why everybody is gravitating towards the US. It has its own magnetic pull because things seem more realistic and possible. What I think this does do is, in terms of how European, UK businesses should interpret this, it does suggest that if you are one of those rarer dreamers in the UK or the EU, the US becomes even more enticing. Yeah, there aren't those limits to you. So, if you want to make your 5 million, your 10 million in exit, you're still more likely to do that in the US, especially now, because you won't have the US equivalent of the CMA sniffing around. Whereas actually, particularly in the UK, seeing the CMA doing the opposite. They are becoming more interventionist in a kind of very European model rather than less interventionist.
So, answer the question 1. Yes. There we go. We've saved you, where were we? 15 minutes to this discussion. It's going to be fine. Question 2. Given the top 10 US tech firms account for 1/6 of the global value of all stock exchanges, is this model now too big to fail or too big to succeed? And for a little bit of context, there were similar cases around the antitrust stuff with Microsoft from around 1998 to around 2004, with all the appeals and settlements going on. It's a blurry end date, long story. It's fascinating and complicated, and if you want to read and learn all about it, I highly recommend the summaries, but it's directly relevant here because the US government won that case, and Microsoft, at least in part, opened up its platform, and it is said to set the stage for Meta, Alphabet, and everyone else to succeed. It's argued by some that without that ruling, all the other big tech giants wouldn't exist in the same way today. And it's complex, and that's one side of the argument. But the search engine Google was founded a few months after the initial case. But then again, Amazon was already calling itself the world's largest bookstore by that point. So, too big to fail, too big to succeed.
Too big to fail, right? And we're already seeing this with another aspect of the news agenda right now, which is we are talking hours before Nvidia's latest quarterly declaration. This will be published hours after Nvidia's quarterly declaration. They posted a blockbuster quarter, and therefore the AI bubble has been staved off, or they posted a bad quarter, and therefore this is another indication that the AI bubble is right upon us.
Just a quick note on this. It's now 11:30 p.m. UK time, give or take, and I'm just about to finish the edit, and the Nvidia stock results are out. The results have beaten estimates for 65 billion revenue rather than projected 62 billion. Nvidia's stock had jumped up about 5% at the time of this later recording to around $196 in after-hours trading, just behind the all-time high of $212 that gave it its $5 trillion valuation. And the CEO, Jensen Huang, was not shy in his statement. Blackwell sales are off the charts and cloud GPUs are sold out, he said. We've entered the virtuous cycle of AI. The AI ecosystem is scaling fast with more new foundation model makers, more AI startups across more industries and in more countries. AI is going everywhere, doing everything all at once. If it is a bubble, these results don't show it. And if Huang is right that the ecosystem really is fast with more foundation models, then it's not a bubble, it's just a boom.
There is a real risk here, which is 1 in every $12 of value in the S&P 500 is concentrated into Nvidia. 1 in every $12. I mean, you mentioned some of the aspects about the concentration amongst the biggest tech companies. You know, the Magnificent Seven holds around about a third of the US stock market value at the minute. They are responsible for something like 50% of the growth of the US stock market in the last 6 months. We have seen data that suggests that effectively GDP growth would be completely stalled in the US if it wasn't for the tech sector. It is too big to fail right now. And I think that is what we're seeing broadly is they are these kind of 500-pound gorillas sitting atop the entire country. And they're now not just too big to fail, but they're kind of almost too big to regulate, at least properly.
So my view is, are they too big to fail or too big to succeed? Yes.
Cool.
So
Excellent.
both of these things, both of these things are true. So like you were saying, like if Nvidia is currently worth around $4.4 trillion, it goes up and down by like entire economies day by day. So that's the last time I checked, it was around $4.4 trillion. But then to give that context, the entire market cap of Britain is $3.3 trillion. It's never been above 4.21 trillion, and that was in October 2007. And we all know what happened just after that. So that's unusually high bubble, that one. So Nvidia is bigger than the UK market has ever been. So that's, if Nvidia by itself collapses, that creates a global crash, the like of which we haven't really seen. And what that means is, if any of Apple, Microsoft, or the AI bubble does burst as we think it might, that has global impact. But it's also too big to succeed because the enshittification of everything, innovation slows once you reach that level of scale. You know, acquisitions replace internal breakthroughs, product cycles flatten, risk management and compliance somehow takes up countless millions of staff hours. It slows everything down. It means the buy or bury thing is the way that those big companies survive. And so actually, in the long term, they can't succeed if we're looking to innovate in these big, important, revolutionary places.
Do you think that the bubble bursting will be a catastrophic event? It was interesting that Sundar Pichai came out this week and the BBC had this huge, massive hullabaloo push notification to go saying Sundar Pichai says that when the AI bubble bursts, it will affect every single company. In other news, water is wet. This is unsurprising in many ways, but actually, it is seemingly a settled conclusion amongst those even within the industry. I guess the challenge is I'm not convinced that a bubble is catastrophic. I see it more as a right sizing.
I think we're probably both thinking the same thing. So I think if Altman says it and Google says it, and it is also the business editor of the BBC, and it's not the technology editor, that shows where this story sits now. It's not a technology story. It's not an innovation story. It's not about the new mechanics of making things. It's new mechanics of doing business. And I think where this becomes a global catastrophe is within pension funds. And suddenly that then makes it a political issue. The second that pension funds drop, it becomes infinitely political. I think most of the markets have factored this in. If everyone sees this catastrophe happening in a way that we didn't really see the subprime until it was already part of the way through, it implies the markets are better than this. The markets are smarter than this. They will readjust. And so it shouldn't have the level of impact. But given that we're in the sort of vibe trading and meme stocks and all of those things, there'll be a large number of people that will lose their entire life savings if, as and when that bubble pops. And if it's the wrong part of the economy or if it's the wrong part of the population, depends where it is globally, that could have huge knock-on impacts.
Yeah. It's notable that you brought up 2007 and cannot help but feel like this is yet another delightful setback for our generation.
This isn't my research, but I was reading, I can't remember the source, but it's not actually the 2007, 2008 crash was predicted perfectly in the same way that the dot-com was predicted perfectly, but actually they're just always 2 years early. So if they're predicting it now, actually it's more likely that it's in 2.5 years. So actually there'll be a delay, but it will happen. People aren't that wrong for long. Question 3. Is this a precedent?
I've got to listen very carefully because there's lots of complicated repetition in here. So go on, go again.
Is this a precedent that means other precedents don't matter? Or is it just an other unprecedented precedent that doesn't set a precedent in these unprecedented times?
It's very unprecedented. Very unprecedented.
So I think, given the precedent that has been set, that we talked about with Microsoft, that was a sort of, Meta winning this battle is the first time that a company has succeeded. But just looking down the list of the big tech firms, I think there are so many new precedents that could be set and reset. So that Google's being investigated, Alphabet, Meta, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, even Nvidia is being investigated based around the way that they are selling chips into different economies. It is so unprecedented because it is coming after all big tech. And that could mean that the precedent is set, then reset, and no one quite knows what the new rules of engagement are. But maybe you're closer to this than me, but actually, if big tech is too powerful and it is bigger than the UK market, one company is bigger than the UK market, does it have the legal routes and the legal tools to be able to just navigate these waters without too much damage being taken?
Well, they're spending an awful lot more on lobbying than they ever have. And I think that's kind of interesting. There was data put out, 51 million euros last year spent by tech companies in Brussels alone, which is a record level. For context, 97 million euros spent in 2021. Meta is top of that list, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, then others. The huge number of individuals that are spending their time talking to these people about this. Something like 890 full-time equivalent lobbyists operating within the European capital right now, which is just an astronomical figure. And they're spending more than a lot of other industries that you might think of who spend a lot on lobbying are doing so. So yeah, I mean, look, they can spend their way out of this, or at least try to weaken some of the limitations and the sort of constraints being put on them. I do think it's going to be an interesting time to see how this shakes out, not least because this is a problem of our own making, right? Like, there are multiple points in the history of this where we could have intervened. You mentioned, for instance, the Microsoft idea back in the kind of late 90s, early 2000s. We knew then that Microsoft was dominant. We have seen other companies start to replicate that in different spheres, particularly in social media and content delivery more generally. We're seeing it now to a certain extent with just a clutch of companies, OpenAI, Google, etc., who are really dominant in this AI space as well. um, it's hard not to think that actually we shouldn't have too much sympathy because it was seen as too difficult a problem 20 years ago. So just because people were unwilling to grasp the nettle then makes it much more difficult to do so now.
But then is that too difficult economically or too difficult politically? Because like you were saying earlier, like if you remove that big AI growth, Trump's economy is flat and his likely approval polls will be even worse if the economy so far is his saving grace within this administration. And without those AI stocks, the economy is flat.
Yeah, well, it's both, right? I mean, it's too difficult politically because it is too difficult economically, and you don't want to run the risk of tanking your economy. But it's also too difficult politically because of the economic imbalance. Like we had a sort of hands-off approach to tech regulation that has worked well for the tech companies because they are now, as you say, larger than many countries, and tech executives are more powerful than world leaders. Yeah, look back to, for instance, the Bletchley Park summit and the fact that Sam Altman was kind of introduced, feted, and interviewed literally by Rishi Sunak. Like Rishi Sunak was the warm up at the time. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland was effectively the kind of rubber chicken dinner party MC for Sam Altman's speech. Let me ask you then, Alex, when did you learn that the internet was broken yet again?
We need to do it. Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Before we get into that, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Welcome back. Half the internet was rendered useless for a few hours this week as the Cloudflare network went down. It all comes down to a single feature file error. The CEO, Matthew Prince, laid out the precise issue in a long post on the Cloudflare blog. And I've been speaking to Matthew about something entirely unrelated and asked if he wanted to come and speak to us about it. His verbatim answer, probably not, but I'm CCing in our comms team who can look into it. So Prince, in all my dealings with him, is one of the few people in tech who is willing to say what he means transparently. And the CTO and he himself actually said that this crash was unacceptable. So for those who don't know, Cloudflare is a service that sits between websites and the wider internet. It protects them from attacks, speeds up their load time, and essentially acts as the internet security guard. Chris, how did this happen? Why does it keep happening? Is there any solution in sight?
That's a good question. So I did not read all of Matthew Prince's blog post, so I might rely on you to actually translate and say what physically
Nobody
happened.
did. Everyone just had an AI summary. So like the 12-minute read. It is so long.
Yeah, but at least he was being
Sorry,
completely transparent in what he said. So I mean, that's good. So what did the AI summary say then?
They fucked up. It's without getting into it was just a deploy of a single feature file that then inadvertently doubled in size and it overloaded their servers. I am not technically in the weeds as much about this, so that's absolute bare bones of it, and it's much deeper, and there are a lot of charts in that I didn't fully understand.
I skimmed through the charts and I was like, this is fun.
It's mainly it's not a hack, it's not any DDoS, it's not any one malicious actor, it's just a single deploy that someone or something messed up and it as part of their day-to-day activities.
But what I find really interesting about it is that we always jump to that, and you and I will know this both. Whenever something like this happened, you invariably get asked, okay, so is it the Russians? And you go, no. And then you go, okay, so is it the North Koreans? And you go, no. Is it the Chinese? No, it's one person either with fat fingers or who has just had a bad day. And that is always the case. And I'm reminded of a story that I wrote 10 plus years ago, which was called The Internet is Being Protected by Two Guys Named Steve, which was about the Heartbleed attack, a vulnerability in OpenSSL. What we often forget in the whiz-bang sort of tech world in which we live, where actually AI does everything for us, is that there are human beings at the core of almost everything that we do, and those human beings can make mistakes. So a misconfiguration in this instance of Cloudflare's bot management system, as you say, doubled, then doubled, then doubled, then doubled. That is a big issue. What is interesting, of course, is that it's a repeat almost of the conversation that we had with the AWS outage, their kind of DNS issues. a repeat often of the Microsoft Azure issue that came about a week after that, which we also spoke briefly about in a previous episode. When you have large swathes of the internet under the control of one individual company, these sort of things do happen. What was interesting, I think, was that this didn't seem to get as much of the attention as I thought it would. It didn't have that impact that the AWS one was, which suggests to me, maybe, I don't know what you think, that there might be just kind of like a little bit of fatigue here about these sorts of stories.
Don't know about fatigue. I just don't think it was quite as widespread as AWS, and it didn't hit the most popular sort of go-to day-to-day sites in quite the same way it did. But there's a sort of critical mass that needs coverage in a way that even yesterday when I was very online, it only affected maybe 2 or 3 of my user journeys in that time.
How did you figure it out? Why did you realize something was wrong?
When social media kept posting about something being wrong. That was, as is always the case. If you're a tech head, then your social media will pop because it will be all of the coders who know something's up before you do, or all of the very online people, all the people checking the Cloudflare blog, or they will find out about it. The down detector will send you a push notification before you'll even notice it, because we're the sort of people that have down detector notifications switched on. I think because the internet went off for a few hours, and actually 2026 is meant to be the year of radical offline stuff, or all brands are pushing for sort of IRL events, and the real premium and the real spending power is in IRL stuff, and so the internet becomes less valuable. So maybe everything will change by next year. The internet will be finished. It won't be cool anymore. But it didn't have that immediate, oh crap, I can't check my email. And I think that was the biggest difference. Email still came through. Social networks were still functioning for the most part. Some big sites were going down, but they weren't hard built into people's hour by hour day-to-day operations.
Depends on how exposed you are to X and ChatGPT, I think, is what I would say, because I noticed it on both of those pretty sharply. But I think this ties into something.
You're one of the 3 journalists left on X.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I don't know why I am, but I think this ties into another story, which is we have these key bits of internet infrastructure, and not quite the same in terms of Cloudflare, but this incredible thing, I don't know, Russia snooping about our subsea internet cables as well. Like the idea now that, these points of failure can really take down large parts of our digital economy, whether it's an accident like Cloudflare or something more deliberate like, Russia's warships right on the corner of UK waters, apparently looking at our subsea cabling. That is interesting to me, because I don't really know how you build in the redundancy for this sort of stuff.
Will come with low orbit satellites. An industry expected a quintuple in revenue by 2030. There we go. I think what happens with that, and then how is it easier or more difficult to shoot down a low orbit satellite than it is to mess around with undersea cables? How easy is it to monitor data traffic if it is going through those low orbit satellites? It becomes an even more complicated thing. When also, who owns them? Is it one country? Is it one company? What does that mean in practice? I don't think anyone has the answer to that. I'm not sure if this is the correct term. There's so many there's sleeper code in so many of our systems that have been there for 2, 5. At some points, I think there was one that might have been as old as 10 years old that's just been sleeping there and then can be activated at any point. So I think this story is far from over. When it comes to this particular thing, it just feels like Cloudflare getting unlucky. And to your point, the fact that so much of the infrastructure, Cloudflare is the sort of backbone of so much of the internet traffic and safe internet traffic, that for it to struggle, like you said, I'm surprised it didn't get more coverage, because Cloudflare is the thing that's meant to keep people safe. And it's not meant to be itself prone to fall victim of it.
Let's hope that Matthew Prince will come and talk to us.
I've talked to him. He is a good conversations. So we'll be back for part 3 in just a second. Welcome back to part 3. The EU has agreed to impose custom duties on low-value parcels entering Europe at some point in 2026, with the so-called de minimis exceptions for goods under €150, so that's about £130, no longer being enforced. This follows a US move to do something pretty similar, just with the higher threshold of $800, or around £600. So this is a direct impact primarily on Shein and Temu, the Chinese brand shipping huge volumes overseas. But Chris, you've been writing about this and you've done all the research and you wrote for Fast Company.
Yeah, I was not allowed by my editor. He had like a ration on the number of times I can mention de minimis because he felt that was hugely off-putting to readers, which I think is true, right? Because nobody likes Latin anymore. Nobody understands
I had to watch a YouTube video of people on American networks pronouncing it 5 times before I had to write down the phonetic pronunciation of that.
De minimis. It's okay. Yeah, I think what is interesting here is that it is in many ways protectionism. And that's not necessarily a bad thing here, because effectively it also has the corollary benefit of stopping us being submerged with cheap tat. Effectively, this is, if we've talked previously about the rise of AI slop, this is effectively the real world version of AI slop. And I say this as someone who shops on Temu sometimes, right? I have bought things on Temu before, and some of those things are genuinely useful. So I have a phone holder that I put on my desk, which is great, but it's just a bit of molded plastic. It was way cheaper than I could get it anywhere else, including at places like IKEA. But then there is this kind of short-termism of some of these products will break very, very quickly, and some of them are not high quality by definition. I think that there is this real concern about you may impact competition in your country or your area, in the case of the EU, by allowing these really cheap Chinese goods to enter the market, by taking advantage of a thing that was not designed for its current use. So the de minimis limit of basically allowing you to ship stuff into a country under a certain threshold, as you said, €150 in the EU or elsewhere, was designed not for this sort of stuff. And instead it has been co-opted by these kind of very quick e-commerce companies to allow them to not have to pay import duties on this stuff. Whereas if you are a traditional company shipping over a container from, ironically, probably the very same factories in which you are getting the stuff from Temu and Shein, you there do have to pay quite a hefty importation fee for the same products in the same way, just because you get them in a slightly different format.
I think Shein particularly is doing some frighteningly futuristic, frighteningly tech savvy, and frighteningly cheap things. I was trying to work out what the actual cost, if you produce a t-shirt in the UK, not excluding profit, excluding VAT, excluding all of those things, how much a t-shirt would cost to make in the UK if it was. There's a difference between fair trade and fair wild, and we're not going to get into that here. But essentially, without any exploitative labour and all of this, and it having a fully understood trade routes, it would be cost to break even. It would cost £20 to make a t-shirt. So any t-shirt you buy in the UK for less than £20, at some point or other, there has been a blurry bit of ethical stuff happening with your t-shirts. And that's not to say that more expensive t-shirts are more ethically traded. There's all manner of different problems with really premium brands using really complicated labor routes and all manner of ethical concerns. But that means that if you're buying those cheap things, that's where the issues come. I think with Shein's business model, and this is something where Zara's copied it, and there are so many new companies copying it, is they put out this test site, and if 3 people buy it really quickly, then suddenly they get so many products, and they produce it quickly, they 3D print it or however they make it, and they test the market live before they start building them in batch. It's a really quick to market, really quick to product system that really is exciting technologically. But when it comes to this stuff around the de minimis, I think it's the 5th time we've said it now, so
my editor will be striking it from the record.
Maybe it should. It doesn't mean anything. It feels like pure politics, not actually having any, and it's not based around fair trade. It's not based around anything meaningful. It's just a case of how can we get one over on China? How can we stop China doing this mechanic of trade? And it's more isolationist than it is actually sensible.
I think things are starting to change in terms of the perception of tech, which is why it's a really opposite time to be doing this podcast, and why it's really important that we have people who know their stuff talking about it, because actually there is a recognition in newsrooms, I think, that tech is no longer just this kind of like oddball thing that you could stick on a couple of pages 2/3 of the way through the newspaper to kind of have some nice futuristic images and like some copy wrapped around it. It's now integral to everything that we do, and increasingly I see organizations relying more and more on their tech reporters to try and move the agenda forward.
Which organizations? Everyone is shrinking their tech desks and making them write about the new iPhone.
I don't know. I think that there is I think that I'm being relied on more to try and contextualize this stuff. And I think that other people are being relied on more to contextualize this stuff.
You and the 3 or 4 other freelancers, maybe. But I think as an industry, until we sort out reader revenue and audience revenues and actually understanding what cohort analysis drives people to loyalty and subscription, then you're going to be left with affiliate revenue of making sure they click through to eBay or Amazon. And that's where we were left with. That's still where we are now with most tech journalism. And there are exceptions. That Wired is doing wonderful work. The Atlantic is starting to do wonderful work. But that's still US publications. When it comes to the UK, there is and the reason why we set up this podcast is because there isn't that sort of deep thinking, understanding around tech's intersection with everything else. Because it's not profitable, because it's not brand safe, and it doesn't provide affiliate revenue so you can buy your latest Amazon purchases. Anyway, we are off topic. So that means it is time for the questions to which we don't have an answer for. Do you want to go first, or should I go first?
My question was originally going to be, what do you think Nvidia's share price is going to be? But then that is a question to which we will literally have the answer.
Okay, I'm going to give you a lighter question. Saudi Arabia still own the streaming wars of boxing, or is it now DAZN, Netflix? Does Jake Paul own all of boxing? This is after Anthony Joshua has agreed to fight Jake Paul in a $100 million fight on Netflix, breaking through a number of different agreements that both of them have had.
Yeah, I mean, Jake Paul doesn't care about these sorts of things, right, in terms of agreements. He just is dominant in everything that he does. What's interesting about DAZN, actually, is that they have kind of been muscled out of this. They were initially the ones that took bets on YouTube boxing in the early days. I can rightfully claim to be one of the OGs on YouTube boxing. In fact, you might have been an editor when you were at Metro who said that I could write about YouTube boxing. One of few in the UK who took that chance.
Metro is setting boxing. We had a boxing reporter. We were the first and only national publisher to live stream chess boxing, one of the greatest spectator sports on earth. If you haven't gone, go and see it. It is so much fun. 1 round of chess, 1 round of boxing. It's either checkmate or knockout, 3 minutes of each. Glorious fun. That made the national news agenda when a Lib Dem councillor, I think, was chess boxing, UKIP, then UKIP MEP. And it didn't seem like the UKIP MEP was that familiar with boxing.
Was he familiar with chess, though? That's the question.
We only saw 1 round of chess. It was unclear as to. He didn't last very long in the boxing bout. It's still available probably on the internet somewhere. Final question. Is a €20,000 fine fair for using an electronic device on a flight to France?
It should be 30,000, 40,000, 100,000, no? I've recently taken flights on airlines where they have Starlink Wi-Fi. Air Baltic is proudly the first airline in the world that has fully fledged, full fat Starlink Wi-Fi from the second that you step on the plane to the second that you step off. I'm incredibly worried that it's going to become like a bus or a train soon, where you're just bombarded with, for instance, people watching the Anthony Joshua and Jake Paul boxing match loud with no speakers while you are trying to get some sleep somewhere over the Atlantic.
So the story on this is that disruptive flyers face up to a €20,000 fine and a 4-year boarding ban in France. The government announced basically fines up to €10,000 for the first offence, but rising to €20,000 for repeat offences, and that includes the use of an electronic or electrical device when its use has been prohibited. It's a little bit tabloid in the fact that that 20,000 fine will actually be used for that, but it is possible.
Do you buy ever Wi-Fi packages on planes?
Refuse to. Absolute. Anything in a captive market. I do not buy anything on an airplane or on a ferry or anywhere where there is a captive market where you don't get a choice. I think until they fix that problem, refuse it. I will download all my things to an iPad and I will watch them.
You see, I'm in the unfortunate position where I have had to previously work on flights, so I have bought Wi-Fi packages. I once filed a story for Wired over the course of a flight to the US where I felt like I was living in the future. I reported out, wrote and filed a story while 30,000 feet in the air, which was just remarkable to me.
Did you expense it there?
I did not. This was before I was really smart about business expenses. So unfortunately, I did not do that. This is actually one of the things that keeps me from going on cruises, Alex. I feel like I might be a cruise guy, except for the fact that of the extortionate Wi-Fi packages.
What makes you a cruise guy?
Love me a buffet. Buffets and cruises go hand in hand, I understand. Still got that dream. Buffets a go-go. That's all I want. I'm a simple man. Just some buffets.
Are you a regular all-inclusive type holidayer?
No, absolutely not. They're the worst thing in the world, which is also what keeps me from trying a cruise, because I'm a little bit like, that's what this is, but at sea, and you can't escape, right?
What's the difference between a cruise and an all-inclusive?
One you get seasick and one you get food poisoning.
Surely an all-inclusive is like a better version.
Sunstroke or something. One you get seasick, one you get a sunstroke. There you go. That's... Yeah, you're right. It is probably better, to be fair.
All-inclusive is like the gateway drug to the cruise. I feel like cruise is just for the experts.
I don't know. I'll have to look. I'll have to see. I'm just not ruling it out at the minute. I'm neither ruling it in nor ruling it out.
On that directly, technologically, future-forward note, that will be all we have for today. Crashes and Everything Popular is Wrong production. Follow us on all your favourite podcast platforms. The music is from Nuffer. Check them out on all the streamers. We're hosted by Acast, assisted by Riverside Studios, and we are published every Thursday morning. Get in touch if you want to say how great this is, or if you just want to chat about something, you are covered. So you can find me on Alex Huds, ALEXHUDS, on all TikTok, Instagram, X, or wherever. Chris is slightly more complicated, but at Stokel on X, and all of his links to everything else is there. See you next week.